What happened to every undisputed champion since the year 2000. So this will take place in the 3-belt and 4-belt era. With that being said, let's start the video. In the lower weight classes in the 2000s and above, there has never been an undisputed champion. In some classes, there hasn't been at all. The only fighter who fell just shy by a year and some change was Vic Darchinyan in 2008, after he had defeated Christian Mijares to become the WBC, WBA, and IBF champion. And unfortunately, this is after the year 2006. The 4-belt era started in 2007. Since this video was made 4 years ago before the Undisputed unification, I can now discuss this. Inoue campaign at Bantamweight started in May of 2018. His first fight at Bantamweight, after fighting at Superfly, he was up against WBA champion Jamie McDonnell, who was making his 7th defense of the title. The winner of this fight will be allowed to compete in the Bantamweight tournament. Inoue would shockingly put away McDonnell in the first round. Keep in mind, Inoue's power before Bantamweight was inconsistent, and McDonnell is a pretty big bantamweight who had defeated the talented Tomoki Kameda years prior. This was just shocking to see. Then for Inoue in his first fight in the tournament, knock out Payano in the first round. This would set him up against Emmanuel Rodriguez to unify for the IBF title. Rodriguez won the title from Paul Butler a year prior. Inoue would put away Rodriguez in 2 rounds to advance to the finals. In a shocking development, Donaire entered the tournament. He was actually able to make the weight of bantamweight, so really it was just money and opportunity rather than actually growing out of the weight class. Donaire would show his prospects as the underdog against the undefeated talent Ryan Burnett. We would see glimpses of what to come with Donaire, but unfortunately there would be a freak accident with Ryan getting injured and the fight coming to an immediate end. Donaire would move forward and defeat Stephen Young to go to the finals, which this would turn out to be an absolute classic for Inoue to come up as the winner and become the ring and tournament champion. Due to the pandemic, Inoue took several steps backwards to where he was not able to resume his campaign until 2022. However, this would set up his rematch with Donaire. This being for the WBC title, as Donaire had picked it up in 2021. Inoue not taking any chances to allow Donaire back into the fight would stop him in 2 rounds. This would finally set up the Undisputed unification against Paul Butler, which for my Filipino subscribers and viewers, yes, it should have been against John Ray Casimero, but he really fumbled it there in his fight with Butler, which resulted in him to get stripped of the title and Butler elevated to champion status. Inoue will end up becoming undisputed, the first in the lower weight classes since the 2-belt era, stopping Butler in the 11th round. So all this time when Inoue was at the back end of his campaign of his undisputed run, the media and a certain group of media was pressing for a fight with Stephen Fulton, who was in a weight class above him. Fulton got the WBC and WBO titles in 2021. In typical PBC stable fashion, call out and blame the guy who is nowhere near you, either by weight class or TV network, just to generate clout and clicks. So instead of pressing for an undisputed unification fight against Akhmadaliev to make a potential matchup with Inoue bigger and give Inoue more of a reason to move up when he becomes undisputed to get that fight made, making it undisputed versus undisputed, social media in the States just downplayed what Inoue was doing, prop up Fulton while not pressing Fulton on unifying for undisputed in his weight class. Because either way, it's a cross-promotion, cross-network fight here. Same thing we saw at Super Middle with Canelo on one side and Benavidez and Plant on the other. Inoue in his first fight at Super Bantamweight would be against Fulton. Inoue would stop Fulton in 8 rounds to become the WBC and WBO champion. Akhmadaliev would end up losing to Marlon Tapales, which this would set up the undisputed unification where Inoue would stop Tapales in the 10th round to become undisputed in his second weight class. Since then, Inoue has made 7 defenses of the undisputed title. 2022, Devin Haney becomes the first undisputed champion since Pernell Whitaker in 1990, his reign ending in 1992. Since this is relatively recent, it looks like Haney is set to face the man that originally gathered the bulk of the belts to make this historic milestone possible, former 3-division champion Vasyl Lomachenko. So we'll see what plays out coming into 2023 for Devin Haney. Some people are predicting that Haney will vacate and move up in class because how he looked at the weigh-in. He looked a bit more drawn out than what people were accustomed to. Now, we don't know what Haney did diet-wise for both fights because he came in lighter in the rematch than he did in the first fight. So again, it's a bit on the speculative side, and we'll just have to see what plays out. Devin Haney will go forward with his promise and fight Vasyl Lomachenko. Haney will pick up an early lead. Vasyl will pick it up in the mid to late rounds. He would have an amazing 10th round. However, he would not carry that momentum going forward and finish the fight. This allowed Haney back in to close the fight off and win by a close unanimous decision. Unfortunately, there would not be a rematch. Haney will go forward with a potential fight with Shakur Stevenson. A deal was not made over the summer, and Haney vacated all titles to move up to junior welterweight. Junior welterweight has surprisingly the most. Costa Tszyu, who was originally the IBF junior welterweight champion, was dethroned by Vince Phillips in the 10th round. He would become the WBC champion 2 years later, after 4 title defenses, and within that 4, a unification for the WBA title against Sean Brent Mitchell. The unified champion was set to face IBF champ Zab Judah for the undisputed title. Tszyu would stop Judah in the 2nd round to become the first undisputed champion since Takeshi Fuji in 1967. Tszyu would make 2 defenses of the undisputed title till his reign would end when the WBC stripped him of the title in the final quarter of 2003. Despite being named champion emeritus by the WBC, given Tszyu privileges to challenge for the title and be the immediate mandatory when he is ready, that would never come about, and he would continue to defend the IBF and ring titles till he was dethroned by Ricky Hatton 2 years later. Costa Tszyu will retire right after that fight. Crawford moved to junior welterweight at the perfect time. This was right at the start of a renaissance in the weight class, as PBC lost power in the division. Danny Garcia, who was pretty much holding the belts hostage, not fighting his mandatory opponent Victor Postal, was finally stripped of the WBC title. He would then move up to welterweight. Postal will show to the world why he was being avoided and shockingly put away Lucas Matisse for the vacant WBC title.
And Matisse is down. 7, 8, 9, 10. This is over. Victor Postal has knocked out Lucas Matisse.
Roy said it could happen.
Somewhere down the road, there might be an amazing fight in this division between 2 tall, rangy athletes, Crawford and Postal.
Lamont Peterson, who was the IBF champion, followed up as well. He was stripped of his IBF title after the Garcia fight. Keep in mind, the Danny Garcia fight was a non-title fight at a catch weight of 143 pounds. But Peterson's title was on the line if he were to lose to Danny. He lost and he was stripped of the title, and mandatory, the 47-0 Cesar Rene fought for the vacant title against Ik Yang. Adrian Broner would surely pick up the vacant WBA title, and he would get stripped in his next fight against Theophane, and Ricky Burns would pick it up in his fight against Michelle Rocco just a month later. Crawford would pick up the WBO title against Thomas Delorme just a year later. He would unify against Victor Postal for the WBC and ring title. After some change of hands with the IBF title, unknown undefeated Namibian fighter Julius Ndongo would emerge victorious as the IBF champion. Then he would unify against Ricky Burns, and here we go, Crawford versus Ndongo for the undisputed title. Terrence Crawford will become the first undisputed champion in men's boxing since O'Neal Bell in 2006. Pacquiao just losing to Jeff Horn, guys like Errol Spence coming up. The glamour division was free real estate for Crawford to move up and become the next big star in and outside the sport, so he vacated all the belts before considering to make a title defense. The notes do mention Sergey Lipinets and the difficulties with making that IBF defense within that time period, but we gotta look at the big picture here. Crawford had options to take over the welterweight division and become a household name. So with all the belts going vacant, luckily the belts fell into the right hands and there was a junior welterweight tournament held. Josh Taylor will come out victorious, defeating Regis Prograis in the finals to become the IBF and WBA champion. Jose Ramirez will become the WBC champion and then unify against Maurice Hooker. With the pandemic slowing things down, when boxing finally opened up, Taylor versus Ramirez was finally made. In an amazing 12-round fight, Taylor would come out victorious as the undisputed champion at junior welterweight. Taylor would make one defense of the title, which he would win by split decision, with people claiming Jack Catterall should have won. So if the whole thing with MTK Global, Josh Taylor, and some other fighters being linked up to that making things complicated, Taylor was ultimately stripped by the WBA for not signing the contract to fight mandatory Albert Puello, and this is a to be continued what comes up in the future of this weight class and with Josh Taylor. Coming to the 2000s, the top guys in the welterweight division was Shane Mosley and his rival Vernon Forrest. Forrest would end up dethroning Mosley in 2002, then beat him in the immediate rematch that same year. Forrest was set up to face newly crowned WBA champion Ricardo Mayorga. The disrespect HBO showed to Mayorga was savage. As mentioned in a previous video, this is a unification fight for the WBA, WBC, and Ring Magazine titles, and this is your promotional poster. You would have thought this was Forrest making a mandatory defense against an unknown guy that it wasn't really necessary to have on the poster. Just look how tiny Mayorga's name is on the official poster. That is comedically bad. So Forrest would get upset by Mayorga. Mayorga would beat Forrest in the immediate rematch, and now we got him against the newly crowned IBF champion Corey Spinks. Corey is the son of the former undisputed heavyweight champion Leon Spinks. Spinks was a big underdog against Mayorga, and he would come up victorious against Mayorga to win by majority decision.
To engage Spinks.
Oh! Missouri, the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, Corey, the next generation.
To become the first undisputed champion since UK's Lloyd Hunningham in 1986. Spinks would make 2 defenses of the title, beating Zab Judah and Miguel Angel Gonzalez before running into Zab in the rematch. Judah would travel over to Spinks' backyard of St. Louis. This would be Spinks' 3rd defense of the undisputed title.
A big part of this story, of course, is the venue. More than 20,000 people have paid their way to collectively wrap up Corey Spinks in a big hug that they hope will push him to a win.
My gosh, the crowd energy from this ring walk performance is unmatched to this day. You had Nelly, an artist from St. Louis, at the peak of his career with a surprise performance. That crowd was wildin'. That's a sight we won't see and hear from fight fans in the States. Them folks from Omaha at Crawford's hometown fights, the only people I can say that can remotely rival that energy. But anyways, in a very close fight, Judah ends up stopping Spinks to become the undisputed champion. Judah will make 1 defense of the title, and keep in mind, Mayweather had just moved up to welterweight and was eyeing a fight with Judah. More than likely them fighting later in the year of 2006. Judah just had to get past his mandatory opponent, Carlos Baldomir. Judah, who was rumored to have not trained for the fight, gassed out early for Carlos to rally and beat Judah to become the champion. Now the WBA and IBF titles were not on the line because of the sanction fees on Baldomir's end. WBC and ring titles was on the line, and Carlos was awarded that. WBA stripped Judah for losing, and the IBF decided to not strip Judah. Reasons why, in his fight with Mayweather, this fight was for the IBF title. Before we move on to the next weight class, let's discuss real quick how close Mayweather was to becoming undisputed, which would have changed a lot when it comes to his legacy. But also, he had another crack at the title after defeating Manny Pacquiao. Floyd had the WBC, WBA, WBO, and ring titles. Only man left was IBF champion Kell Brook. Now, Floyd was stripped of the WBO title just days after winning it due to failing to pay $200K in sanction fees. This brings up this video discussion's topic. If Floyd went ahead and paid the sanction fees with the intentions of unifying with Kell Brook for the undisputed title, who would have won? Shortly after becoming undisputed at junior welterweight, Crawford would make his debut at welterweight in 2018 against WBO champion Jeff Horn. Crawford would stop Horn in the 9th round to pick up the title. Meanwhile, all the rest of the titles were locked up within the PBC Showtime network. Errol Spence, who wanted this fight really bad with Crawford, did his end of the business, going after the rest of the title holders in his stable, while Crawford does his end of the bargain, fighting his mandatories and remaining the undefeated champion. You really have to give Errol Spence credit here, because if we're going back to what was going on in super middleweight with Canelo on one side and the rest of the PBC stable that had the belts on the other side, Arrow was really putting in the work there, and he was making no excuses, while whatever was going on over there, it was just a lot of finger pointing and excuses. Danny Garcia was the WBC champ. He was unifying against the WBA champ, Keith Thurman. Thurman would come up victorious, however, he would take a lot of time off to heal his body, which the WBC title would go vacant, and that would fall into the hands of Sean Porter. An unexpected challenger would show up and slow this campaign down, which that person was Manny Pacquiao. Pacquiao was the WBA regular champ, all while Thurman was a super champ. Since Manny had signed with PBC, that was a lot of new money coming in. So after the big fight with Manny and Broner, Thurman, now at 100%, is chasing a Pacquiao fight. This fight would be made July of 2019. While Spence unifies with Porter in September, Pacquiao beats Thurman, and he is now the WBA super champ. Spence beats Porter, and on paper, we are one fight away from setting up an undisputed unification.
My dreams ain't come true yet. My dream is to become undisputed welterweight champion of the world.
Season, right? I know where your heart's at, my man. But this ultimately is one step forward into that ultimate dream.
Which really, Spence versus Pacquiao could be scheduled for the end of 2019. But such plans came to an end when Spence Jr. was involved in a serious car accident. So any talks was put to a pause. There are rumors for a potential rematch with Manny and Mayweather, however, that would get shut down as the pandemic would pause all of boxing at the prize fight level. Spence would bounce back 14 months later against Danny Garcia with a brilliant show. The WBA made things more complicated than it should be by making Pacquiao champ in recess. And then when boxing fully opened up, when talks of Spence versus Pacquiao being made, due to the WBA making Pacquiao champ in recess, this fight is no longer a unification, and it's now wasted time on Spence's end since the WBA title is down on the line. The fight will still go forward. Spence injures his eye, which forces him to drop out of the fight. Ugas, who was promoted to WBA champion, goes on to fight Manny. Manny loses. Ugas goes on to fight Spence 6 months later. Spence wins with Showtime giving their blessing for him to pursue a Crawford unification, as this question was never really asked in the post-fight till that point. The following year in 2023, fight will be made officially May 25th for both guys to be unifying for the undisputed title on July 29th. This will be the first undisputed unification at welterweight since Corey Spinks versus Ricardo Mayorga in 2003. Almost exactly 20 years. Everyone was expecting it to be a 50-50 fight with some late round drama. Ended up being a dominating performance by Terrence Crawford to get the TKO victory in the 9th round to become the first 4-belt undisputed champ at welterweight, as well as becoming 2-time undisputed. After Wright's heartbreaking loss against Fernando Vargas, he rebounded, claiming an IBF regional belt to later claim the vacant IBF title against Robert Frazier. Wright would go on to make 4 defenses of the title. During all that, Oscar De La Hoya had beaten Javier Castillejo for the WBC title, then unified against Fernando Vargas for the WBA and ring titles. De La Hoya would lose it all against Shane Mosley in the rematch. Mosley was set to face Felix Trinidad for $10 million, but he decided to risk it all and fight Winky Wright for the undisputed title, which most certainly would have upped the purse for a Trinidad fight and a 3rd fight with Oscar. Wright, who was mostly shadow banned from having big fights, fought like a man possessed, shutting down Mosley's offense and putting on one of the greatest performances to beat Mosley to become the first undisputed champion since the 2-time undisputed champion Koichi Wajima in 1971 to 1975. Wajima still has the most title defenses as the undisputed champion to this date. Well, Wright's reign would end anticlimactically because he was a guy who was never supposed to have been in that position to begin with by the powers to be. Wright would be stripped by the IBF title a month after the Mosley fight for giving Shane a rematch. Wright's reign as the undisputed champion could be the shortest in boxing history, if not the weight division's history. Leon Spinks as well was stripped of the WBC title for giving Ali the rematch. So Jermell, after falling short in 2014 and 2015, getting a fight with Demetrius Andrade on 2 different occasions for the title, which anything Andrade related would be a whole video itself, Charlo would finally get a crack at the vacant WBC title against John Jackson in 2016. He would stop him in the 8th round, and it was just smooth sailing with title defense after title defense. Meanwhile, with the WBA, Erislandy Lara, before his fight against Canelo, had earned the WBA interim title position, would fight WBA regular champion Ishe Smith following after the Canelo fight at the end of 2014. Since Mayweather was still a super champion under the WBA against any legitimate belt organization till Floyd vacated and retired. Since the IBO is not recognized as a legitimate belt organization from other belt organizations, Lara was able to fight for the vacant IBO title while defending a WBA regular title. Lara would get promoted to super status in 2017, which he'll make his first defense of the super title against Yuri Foreman. With the IBF, Jarrett Hurd, who really had that Winky Wright come up, the wild card in the mix, will move up the ranks with the IBF, defeat Tony Harrison for the vacant IBF title, which was a bit of a shocker, and then stop Austin Trout. Now the issue with PBC Al Heyman stables is the blue chip fighters will be on a card together and they never really fight each other, and if they do, it's way too late. The fight everyone wanted to see was a unification between Charlo and Lara. Lara was ranked number 1 and Charlo was ranked number 2 in January 2018. This would determine who's the best in the weight class and for the vacant ring title. Lara is known as a high-risk, low-reward fighter, but in this case, a lot more will be on the line in this matchup, but we didn't get that fight. Instead, Jarrett Hurd is that wild card with not much money invested in him. He was thrown in to fight Lara. Hurd would shock many, defeating Lara in an incredibly exciting fashion, putting Hurd on the map, while Charlo was given a speed bump of a matchup fighting former champ Austin Trout, which he did not look all too impressive compared to Hurd's performance. Now Charlo is ranked number 1 and Hurd is at number 2. Ideally, one would strike the kettle while it's still hot, but no. Another set of fights, potentially risking a big promotion. Hurd was set to fight Jason Wellborn, which he blew through him in 4 rounds, completing his end of the bargain to set up a post-fight promotion. Now all eyes on Charlo to complete his end of the bargain against Tony Harrison. Tony would ruin the big Hurd fight right there by upsetting Charlo to pick up the WBC title. Now you got a problem here and more time to spend to get your blue chip fighter back on the road of unifying the division. So now Charlo has to wait to get his rematch and Hurd has to wait and fight his mandatory opponent. Hurd will get upset by Julian Williams, and since Hurd was a wild card, there was no chance of getting that rematch anytime soon. Charlo, late 2019, would finally get his crack back at the title against Harrison, which in a very close fight, Charlo would make some clutch moves and put away Harrison in the 11th round to regain the title. So Julian Williams, with his luck, will be scheduled to make his first defense in pretty much one of the last major boxing events before the whole world closed down in January 2020 against Jason Rosario. This is a win and you're in to fight Charlo. Rosario would stop Williams in the 5th round to become the IBF, IBO, and WBA champion. 8 months later, when boxing sorta opened up, Charlo and Rosario would unify for the WBA, IBF, and vacant ring titles. In impressive fashion, Charlo would shut out Rosario, knocking him 3 times, the 3rd time being the finisher leading to the KO victory for Charlo to become the new unified champion. Now we cover what is going on with the WBO. In 2015, Demetrius Andrade was stripped of the WBO title due to his inactivity and failing to provide an opponent to face within a 9-month span. The next man in line to fight for the vacant title is Liam Smith, who will pick up the title. Due to Golovkin failing to get a fight with Saunders and an attempt of getting all the belts together for our undisputed unification against Canelo, it was now Canelo's turn.
He's nothing, you know. I give him a couple chances, you know, in Kazakhstan, you know, this talk. He's bad talk. You know, I don't want talking with him. He's nothing for me. You know, he's not ready. He's not ready. He's only talking, you know, he's... I not believe he's ready, you know, he's nothing.
since Canelo could still make junior middleweight, he was still ranked by the WBO at junior middleweight, so therefore he could fight Smith for the title and seamlessly set up a fight with Saunders. Saunders was supposed to make his US and HBO debut on the Canelo-Smith card. This would set up their fight, and the winner fights Golovkin for the Undisputed title that September in 2017. Saunders bails out of the fight with Rosado, leaving Canelo hanging. Canelo still wins the title with Smith, then Saunders leaves Canelo hanging again. Canelo vacates the title. Chavez Jr. is brought in as Saunders' replacement. Miguel Cotto would pick up the vacant WBO title against Yoshihiro Kamagai in an exciting 12-round shutout summer of 2017. Cotto would set up to face Saddam Ali in his farewell retirement fight, which he was doing good till he tore his bicep in the 7th round. Ali would take over and win by a close decision to dethrone Cotto and ruin his farewell to the sport. Ali was originally set to face Liam Smith, but that fight would get canceled, and Jaime Munguia, who is already on the path of being Prospect of the Year, will be thrown into the fight for the title. The massively undersized Ali would get obliterated by Jaime. Jaime would make 5 defenses of the title before vacating it. Brian Castano was ranked number 1 by the WBO, and Patrick T was the interim champion. Since Brian is from a rival network, Golden Boy won the purse bid, which, if given the okay, Brian can cross over to the zone to fight for the title. Luckily, this all happened. Brian would defeat Patrick to win the vacant WBO title, and now the undisputed unification is set. Castano would start fast and rake in an early lead on Charlo despite a big second round from Jermell, but Charlo is an incredibly good finisher late in the fights. Charlo would finish the late rounds strong, winning the last 3 rounds to snag a draw on the scorecards. Obviously, there will be a rematch. The second fight would take off right where it ended, even more exciting than the first. The only difference is Charlo is taking a lot more risks this time around, fighting toe-to-toe and being first with Castano. Despite Castano landing quite a bit of hard leather on Charlo, Jermell was able to fire back and win the exchanges. After more toe-to-toe action in the 9th round, Charlo will finally crack through Castano to knock him down. Castano still did not have his legs. Charlo, with his brilliant finishing skills, would waste no time and energy perfectly putting away Castano with a body shot he did not see coming, as he was expecting Charlo to headhunt. Castano, clearly the wind knocked out of him, was unable to make the count, resulting in a knockout victory for Charlo to capture the undisputed crown and become the first since Winky Wright when he defeated Shane Mosley in 2004.
I don't too much care about the pound for pounds. The Roy Jones and Pernell Whitaker, they can deal with that on themselves. But I want to be the undisputed middleweight champion of the world. We haven't had one since the 80s.
After Hopkins' defeat against Roy Jones Jr., he would rebound and win the IBF title against Segundo Mercado in the rematch. Since Hopkins could not get the fights he wanted because, like Wright, just one of those fighters that are blacklisted by the powers to be.
From early on, he had a rage against the system. Promoters and managers were taking too much money out of his purses, and he used that rage in a positive way.
He did the next best thing, which was be as active as possible, making title defense after title defense, moving up through the world ranks by default. Hopkins made 12 defenses in 4 years. Due to Hopkins' consistency, despite not getting the fights he wanted, he was ranked number 1 by Ring Magazine coming into 1999.
I would not shut up, and I kept talking, and I kept banging the drums, and I kept winning. I kept winning, and when you win, people has to listen.
His relentless drive kept him going in an atmosphere in which a lot of people weren't particularly interested in seeing him survive or thrive.
But we all know that fighters are being taken advantage of, and our lives is on the line, man. That's what I'm trying to say. You telling me I shouldn't be in this sport if I don't agree with the laws and the politics that goes in the sport, and I say you're wrong. I say that's the problem.
What are you going to do to change it?
I can't do nothing in one day, but what I can do by being hold up, this is very important about my power. By being the middleweight champion of the world, one of the best in the world. If you don't want to listen, you would give me that time. That's the reason you're doing this interview now. Thank you.
Keith Holmes would pick up the WBC title the same time Hopkins picked it up in 1996. He would get dethroned in 98, but regain the title in 1999. Japan's Shinji Takahara will pick up the WBA title. He would lose to William Joppy. Joppy will lose it to Julio Cesar Green, in which Joppy will beat him in the second fight, and then end the rivalry, beating Green in the third fight. Coming into the year 2000, HBO and Don King formed a middleweight championship series series to unify the division. This was between IBF champ Bernard Hopkins, WBC champ Keith Holmes, WBA champ William Joppy, and the fighter that this tournament was tailored around, unified junior middleweight champion Felix Trinidad. Hopkins beat Keith Holmes for the WBC title. Trinidad beat Joppy, and the finals was between Hopkins and Trinidad. Hopkins would upset Trinidad, stopping him in the final round to become the first undisputed middleweight champion since Marvin Hagler in 1987.
Oh, huge right hand! Huge right hand by Hopkins. Down goes Trinidad. He knocked out Trinidad.
Bernard Hopkins has put himself up there in the list of all the great middleweights.
Hopkins would make 6 defenses of the undisputed crown.
He's 40 years old and continues to be a marvel. No signs of deterioration, at least not tonight.
Before facing contender Jermaine Taylor. In a highly contested match, Taylor would end Bernard Hopkins' historic 21 consecutive title defense streak to become the undisputed champion.
Good left hook by Taylor. Caught Hopkins coming off the ropes.
To lose now.
The start with a big right hand. That may be the punch that could turn it around for Hopkins. Trusting the fight. The judges are going to get to choose the winner. And both will celebrate now.
And new Undisputed.
Taylor would get stripped of the IBF title a couple months later in 2005 for failing to fight mandatory Arthur Abraham because Taylor agreed to fight Bernard Hopkins in the rematch. This really starts out with Callum Smith. Smith fights in the super middleweight tournament, wins the tournament, and picks up the WBA Super and Ring Magazine titles. Really, Smith should have been awarded the WBC title as well. The title was vacant. Smith was the #1 WBC fighter while holding the silver title. That should go to the #1 ranked guy and whoever is available, which is a toss-up between anyone. Anthony Durrell at #2, Yildirim at #3, and Andre Durrell at #4. Not a #14 ranked David Benavidez. The more you look at these ranks, the more you think, how this man got a title over these guys above him. The very beginning of that super middleweight tournament should have been for the vacant WBC title, not no BS diamond belt. December 2016 to February 2017, you had David Benavidez magically move up #14 in the ranks to #8, and he's fighting #10 ranked Rogelino Luna in the title elimination. These rankings make no sense. Luna was ranked #9 in February 2017, ranked #10 in March before his fight with Benavidez, so that means he dropped rank. This just scrambles my brain, bro. Let's move forward here. Benavidez ends up fighting for the vacant title, obviously wins, gets stripped of the title, and guess what now? It's fought between the #1 ranked Anthony Durrell and whoever is available, which was Yildirim, who was ranked at #2. Durrell wins by a technical decision. Benavidez regains the WBC title. All while that is happening, Caleb Plant got the IBF title and quietly making title defenses. Saunders would pick up the WBO title, and it looked like we may see some nice things brewing. Canelo, who still has a WBA regular title at super middleweight, decided to launch his campaign to become undisputed. Since he is a WBA regular champion, he is forbidden from unifying. So the only person he can fight is Callum Smith, who is the WBA super champion. In 2020, he was set to face Billy Joe Saunders, May of that year, just for the WBO title. That fight would get canceled to not only the pandemic, but also what Saunders posted online. With boxing closed, this campaign was put to a pause. So you have the obvious network divide between DAZN and PBC Showtime. What will make things easier when that time comes up for that big fight, the PBC fighters could do their end of the bargain and start unifying. Welp, nope, not at all. A lot of finger pointing, blaming, that wouldn't really matter at all because Benavidez gets stripped again of the WBC title summer 2020. And it rightfully goes back to which should have been a vacant title between Callum Smith and somebody. But that somebody unfortunately happens to be Canelo. Canelo picks up the WBC, WBA, and ring titles December of that year. With Canelo having the WBA regular title, that made things easier when setting up a Smith fight with the WBA. His WBC franchise middleweight title, I'm assuming that helped with being part of fighting for the vacant WBC title, because Canelo was unranked by the WBC at super middleweight. Shortly after the Smith fight, Canelo faces Saunders May of 2021 and picks up the WBO title. Now Canelo and his team have to work out a stringent process of setting up an undisputed unification between a fighter from a rival network who is Caleb Plant. after an extension, and on the day of the deadline, an agreement was finally made of November of that year to fight on Showtime. In a brilliant effort by Plant, he was able to make it close, but fell short as Canelo finally cracked to his defense in the 11th round. He was unable to recover, and Canelo finished him off to get the TKO victory, become the first ever undisputed super middleweight champion. I would like to mention Joe Calzaghe was short of making that history in 2007 after having to vacate the IBF title to fight Peter Manfredo over Robert Stieglitz, because Peter was a much bigger name to American audiences because of the whole Contender series, which Joe just got signed to HBO. They may have had a foot in this, really. If Joe went ahead and fought Stieglitz as planned, his fight for Kessler would have been for the undisputed title, which would have not only made him the first of the weight class's history, but the first 4-belt era undisputed champion as well. This was really unexpected and a result of the events later that year when Crawford became undisputed at welterweight. After becoming undisputed in 2021 against Plant, Canelo would give Golovkin a rematch. I would say a rematch that Gennady was entitled to. A little too soon for Gennady, as he began to really pick it up and tighten up the cards in the second half, which resulted in a too close for comfort unanimous decision win for Canelo. His next fight would be his first homecoming fight since fighting Kermit Cintron in 2011, which he would get the wide decision win over Ryder. Crawford was actually eyeing a fight with undisputed junior middleweight champion Jermell Charlo, even to the point he was calling out the champ while the fight with Spence was still in play. Charlo was set to face Canelo just a month and some change later. Due to Charlo's poor performance against Canelo, followed up with the embarrassing post-fight interview, Crawford was forced to take a step back on the matter, especially since Charlo would get stripped immediately by the WBO, then followed up by the other belt organizations. Due to the political situation at junior middleweight not being any better than it was at welter, Crawford's next biggest move was to go after Canelo. Canelo will get stripped of the IBF title. He chose to fight Edgar Berlanga. However, the following year, he will regain the IBF, restoring his status as undisputed, defeating Skull. This would set up the Crawford fight. Crawford, who is now the underdog, would shock many, properly building up his base to become a super middleweight and being able to rehydrate well above the limit to handle Canelo. This exceeded everyone's expectations, as Crawford was on a level playing field with Canelo, giving him a lot of trouble, resulting in Crawford to get the win and become undisputed in his third weight class. Crawford would announce his retirement, ending his career with a record of 42-0, 31 knockouts. So the lead up to this would leave most shaking their head. In 1997, the clear number 1 faced the clear number 2 fighter, WBO champion Darius Mikuszewski, and long-reigning WBA and IBF champion Virgil Hill. Darius beats Hill to become the lineal and unified champion. Immediately upon winning, the WBA stripped him of the title because he was the WBO champion. More problems would ensue with the IBF, and that title was left vacant as well. The IBF belt will be fought between William Guthrie and Darren Allen, in which William would lose in the next fight against Reggie Johnson. The WBA title will go to Lou Duvall. Roy Jones Jr. will get his revenge and beat Montel Griffin for the WBC title. Shortly after winning the title, he would vacate it, move up to heavyweight to fight Buster Douglas on May 2nd, 1998. Number 1 ranked Michael Nunn was set to face number 2 ranked Graciano Rossiggiani for Roy Jones Jr.'s vacant WBC title. Graciano won by a split decision. So you have 2 fighters that are champs in Germany that happen to be rivals. So there's a lot of money on the line in Germany for unification. Jones backed out of his fight with Buster Douglas, and the WBC named him champion in recess and claimed due to a typing error, Graciano has supposed to have been the interim champion and not the champion, and they demoted him. A fight was made between Roy and Graciano in November 1999. The fight would be called off by Roy's promoter because Graciano didn't attend the New York press conference, and Muhammad claimed that he couldn't promote the fight if he wasn't present. The WBC on these strange grounds stripped him of that title as well. So Roy continues like nothing happened, unifying against Lou Duvall and waiting for the undisputed fight with Reggie Johnson. All while this is happening, remember all that money for a possible Graciano and Darius fight? Yeah, the WBC thought the Germans were gonna lie down and forget about that. Graciano's team would take the WBC to court and win. Now ESPN says it's a $31 million award and damages, and court case websites state it's $27.8 million reward, $7.8 in compensatory damages, and $20 million in punitive damages. Anyways, the The WBC was unable to pay any of this and proceeded to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy to keep from paying Graciano, and then filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy to avoid once again. Now, I don't know how much the WBC is worth. They're labeled a non-profit organization since 1982, which they're exempted from paying taxes or exempted to an extent. I'm not a financial guy, so whatever. Going by their tax filings and total revenue they are grossing on average, using the last decade as an example, they are making $2.4 to $4 million annually. So therefore, going by what's on paper, there's a chance they may not have been able to pay Graciano. Who knows Graciano's financial situation in those years, because since the WBC filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, in fear of not getting any money back at all, because that would mean the WBC wouldn't exist, he settled for an undisclosed amount of money. Alright, that's a lot to discuss here, because if that didn't happen, Graciano is fighting Darius for the WBC and WBO titles. More than likely, Darius wins, and this changes a lot when it comes to how negotiations and how the public perceives a fight between Roy Jones Jr. and Darius Mikuszewski. So with all that being said, Jones finally gets his crack a year later and faces Reggie Johnson for the undisputed light heavyweight title and completely shuts him out to win by a wide unanimous decision. This goes to another controversy in 2001. Ring Magazine reintroduces the ring title. Instead of grandfathering in the lineal champs, just what the WBC and WBA did when they first came into power by grandfathering in the current undisputed champions, they didn't do any of that with the lineal champs, which created a massive amount of confusion in every weight class, especially since some of these lineal champs were just normally ranked or not even ranked as number one. So you had Roy Jones made the ring champion and Darius was the lineal champion. This would later sort itself out in boxing as a whole when all these lineal champs lost or retired as a champ. So since the Darius fight was not going to happen, Roy went after any title that was there to add to his collection, beating Eric Harding for the vacant IBO title. After 7 defenses as undisputed champion, Roy Jones, after his fight with Clinton Woods, would vacate the IBF title. Jones holds second to the most undisputed title defenses at light heavyweight. The man on top is Archie Moore at 8 defenses, and his reign would have actually lasted longer if the NBA didn't strip Moore for failing to fight EBU champion Eric Schopner. There's way too much information to explain for the titles getting in one spot for an undisputed unification at light heavyweight. I would highly recommend you go to my video of the tale of Arthur Beterbiev versus Dimitri Bivol. This fight got held up for a while because of politics, not with the networks or promotions, but with the belt organization. That would all change when Turkey came into the picture.
In your own words, sir, what was the change of heart with you and the council?
I will not talk about anything other than boxing.
Money, I got money.
The fight was finally made for October of 2024. Incredibly close fight with Bivol to hit the wall late in the fight, with Beterbiev to close out the fight and snag a majority decision win to become undisputed. There would be an immediate rematch, and this would be a flip-flop of the first fight. Bivol would start off better. Beterbiev would get the middle rounds for Bivol to pick it up and not hit the wall, closing the fight like how he started it, to win by a majority decision to become the undisputed champ at light heavyweight. The amount of disrespect O'Neal gets is insane. He's the first undisputed Cruiserweight champion since Evander Holyfield in 1988, and the last undisputed champion of the 3-belt era. The 4-belt era started in 2007. I don't know why TV networks and analysts keep on mentioning Jermaine Taylor. Bell became the undisputed champion January 2006 when he defeated WBA and WBC champion John Mark Mermek.
And O'Neal Bell is the undisputed Cruiserweight champ, the first since Holyfield.
Jermaine Taylor's reign as the undisputed champion ended the year he won it in July 2005. He vacated the IBF title on October 11th, 3 months after winning it. Despite being in the history books, this man has been scrubbed away by the media. And you have to ask yourself, why hasn't Bell himself came out and talked about it as well? Unfortunately, Bell can't speak for himself because he's no longer with us. He passed away back in 2016. With all that being said, Bell's reign as the undisputed champ would come to an end April of that year, year, as he was forced to pull out of his fight with IBF mandatory Steve Cunningham because he needed dental surgery. Following after this event, Bell would travel to Mormec's backyard of France to make his first defense of the WBA, WBC, and ring titles. He would lose by a close unanimous decision. Fast forward, David Haye picks up the WBC and WBA titles off of Mormec, and then unifies against Enzo Maccarinelli for the WBO title.
Lacey card 2 years ago. Big right hand by Haye. Maccarinelli is rocked in the corner, and he goes down.
Boy, the referee very late. This one may be over.
Unsteady legs. Only the second round. He's got a minute remaining, and the fight is stopped.
The only thing that was left was Thomas Adamek for his IBF title. Now, why didn't this fight happen for the Undisputed title? That's a real head scratcher. So after that era at Cruiserweight, it seemed like no one wanted to fight each other. It was really a lot of nothing going on when it comes to unifications. Juan Pablo Hernandez and Steve Cunningham were the only guys to step up. Hernandez was the IBF champ, Cunningham was ranked number 3, but I can't confirm the ranks because the only archived Ring Magazine rank of that year has him as number 3. Marco Huck was number 1, but Huck moved up to heavyweight, lost to Povetkin that year, and moved back down and got a draw. So I can imagine in between that time, Cunningham was moved to number 2 in the rankings upon that fight being made, and it being for the vacant ring title. It's very weird. At a certain point, all these guys fought each other when they didn't have titles, but when they did end up winning a title, they didn't bother trying to unify. They were more than likely making a crap ton of money defending against mandatories, and the money just wasn't there for unification. And it really seemed like everyone was cool with that, because I can't find anyone calling anyone out. You had these guys raking up crazy title defense counts and attractive boxing records. And then Alexander and Big Capital came and shook up the whole division. Once Usyk came on the scene, he was an immediate draw with Ukrainian fight fans. Once Alexander got the WBO title, very quickly, promotions and networks of these fighters all came on board when a company by the name of Camosa AG threw in $50 million total purse for a tournament, not only in the Cruiserweight division, but for the Super Middleweight division as well. The Cruiserweight division woke up and there was a lot of good fights. Usyk would beat Bradis for the WBC title. Murat Gassiev, the IBF champ, would defeat Dorticos for the WBA title. And then you have the finals with Usyk and Gassiev. Usyk will win by a wide margin on the scorecards to become the undisputed champion. Tony Bellier had vacated the WBC title prior to pursue a David Haye fight, which ended up turning into a 2-fight series. Once it was finished, Usyk had given him the shot to fight for the undisputed title in his final defense before moving up to heavyweight. Historically, this is definitely the biggest fight in Cruiserweight history. It was a fun watch while it lasted. Usyk would take over in the second half of the fight and take Bellew out in the 8th round. This would be Tony's last fight, and for Usyk, he would vacate all the belts and make a beautiful transition to heavyweight, where he would defy the odds and beat Anthony Joshua to become the WBO, WBA, IBF, and IBO heavyweight champion.
AJ is in trouble. Do you believe this?
After defeating Oliver McCall in the rematch for the vacant WBC title, Lewis couldn't really do anything because of the network divide between Showtime and HBO. Lewis fought exclusively on HBO, and the rest of the belt holders fought on Showtime. As the Tyson versus Holyfield fight was always been a fight everyone wanted to see, that fight offer came up after Holyfield's fight with Bobby Chise, and due to the fact that Holyfield did not look good, quoted by Mike Tyson, he took the fight.
Yeah, I fight him, and that's how that happened. Yeah, because, he looked really in the fight before he fought me.
That's it. It just so happened they found that that's the best time to fight Holyfield. I'm right for the picket. He couldn't even knock Bobby Chance out.
The media was already against Holyfield, as they claimed he was past his prime and he can't beat Mike just because he wasn't a real heavyweight but a manufactured one.
The media had a lot to do with the aura of he's invincible and all that. And from the very beginning, I told you that he wasn't. Tyson was a great fighter, probably the most overrated fighter in the history of the division. The most beatable fighter in the history of the division, and Holyfield is just a notch above what you guys think he is.
The 22-1 underdog would upset Tyson to win the WBA title. He would follow up and beat Tyson in the rematch.
Tyson's in trouble!
After the Tyson fight, Holyfield would beat Michael Moore in their rematch to earn the IBF title. After a defense against Von Bean, the undisputed unification between Lewis is set for March of 1999. The first undisputed unification since Tyson versus Spinks, and there will be the first undisputed champion since Riddick Bowe. The fight started off competitive early, but started to get midway through the fight, Lewis would gain momentum and begin to take over. Holyfield would have some moments, but through the public's eyes, it was certainly not enough to get a foot in the cards. The fight would be controversially ruled a draw, much as the press and even the mayor of New York at that time bombed the decision. Jumping the gun with the conspiracy passing them off as facts is also not the right thing to do, because we very well could have had two judges who had a very shitty day on the job, which in a job like this, you should do your best to bring your A game each time, but you can't be perfect all the time. The Sunday Mirror with a bogus claim that the judge was paid off thousands of dollars to favor Holyfield. Unless you have 100% proof, receipts and all, this is a dangerous claim to make. The judge Eugenia Williams filed for a libel suit in the British courts against the Sunday Mirror and won. Sunday Mirror had to pay Williams for damages they had created, the court fees, and make a public apology. Anyways, obviously a rematch would be made. The rematch, Lewis had his hands full with Holyfield.
The jab in Holyfield's face, so I wouldn't have to remember anything. Hard right hand by Holyfield. Lewis is bending down, and Holyfield landed the left hook. Bending down. You know what? He's good, I guess, when he's Holyfield off. Now Lewis smiles as Holyfield.
Lewis would get a lead, but at a price, as he was exhausted midway through the fight. Holyfield was able to tighten up the cards, despite Lewis slowing the fight down to his pace.
Shot, and it hurt Lewis. Hard left hook by Holyfield. Lewis stunned again. Lewis stands in. Holyfield fires back with the left hook. Combinations. Hard right hand by Holyfield. Lewis to the body. His own right hand lands flush. They trade shots at close range. Round 7, the best round. These two fighters have fought against each other in 2 fights.
Holding when he needed, trying to tire Holyfield out by putting all of his weight on him. The championship rounds, Lewis was able to put a dagger in the fight in the 11th round, rallying, but coming into the 12th, he took the round off, maintained, and survived for a decision.
Has Holyfield ahead in the fight to create as much of this, do it. It'll be the 11th time. The two fighters are putting forth, but still, Holyfield trying to put them
to win on the scorecards unanimously to become the undisputed champion. Falling after the win and coming into the new decade of 2000, the fight HBO and many were pressing for outside of the Tyson fight was a Michael Grant fight. Lewis's mandatory with the WBA was John Ruiz. Lewis went ahead with the Grant fight and the WBA stripped him of the title, thus ending Lewis's reign as the undisputed champion. Now unfortunately in the 4-belt era, Vladimir Klitschko had all but one title, which was the WBC, and for years it belonged to his brother Vitaly. When Vitaly retired to pursue politics, Vladimir made it his mission to bring his brother's title back home and become the undisputed champion. For some reason, he was robbed of the opportunity of doing that due to politics. So the next thing he could do is try to become the WBC mandatory while making mandatory defenses of those belts. He was also attempting to move up the WBC ranks as well, which is just ridiculous. Bryant Jennings was ranked number 3 by the WBC January 2015. Klitschko fought him, beat him, and the following month, Jennings was smudged completely from the rankings. Povetkin at number 1, Perez at number 2, and Tyson Fury at number 3. But Klitschko is nowhere to be found. As the demand for a Wilder fight to be made, Shelley Finkel, Wilder's manager, had no interest in making the fight, stating Wilder will not be rushed into a Vladimir unification, shutting it down right there. Due to Wilder's background as a basketball player turned boxer and very rough around the edges, they did not want to ruin his development as a fighter, which that is a bit of an oxymoron since he is a world title holder now. Shelley Finkel stating, "Look, Wilder is a baby winning the title. It was his first title fight. There will be a time for unification. There will be a time for all those things. He could go and fight Povetkin in Russia and make make $10 million. Give him a couple fights, maybe bring something back to Alabama, let him develop just like any other athlete. They don't take someone who is a great college prospect and throw him right in, and this kid is a great prospect. So Klitschko would later that year lose to Tyson Fury and lose it all. Tyson Fury pretty much knew that fight was not going to happen, and he still had the Klitschko rematch. So in the post-fight interview, he said he had the 4th title and trash talk Wilder.
Can you not count? I've got 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Why do we need to mention Deontay Wilder? Let's have a laugh at his name, shall we? Vladimir Klitschko was the number 1 in the division, probably the pound-for-pound king. This man's been on top for so long. Now Floyd Mayweather's gone, Vladimir Klitschko took his place. So, I just took him out tonight. So why would we have to be bothered about a novice basketball player who just came to boxing a couple of years ago?
I'm already close to 10 pages here, so I'm gonna hit the fast forward button here. We are in the same place as we were almost 10 years ago. One guy with almost all the belts, and one guy with a WBC belt. Will we finally see an undisputed unification in this weight class? Usyk versus Fury is finally made for May of 2024. Absolute insane ad campaign. This was a classic. When it looked like Fury was about to cruise into the final quarter of the fight on top, Usyk would completely ruin that by almost getting Fury out of there in round 9. Fury, who used up a lot of energy trying to survive, did not have much in the tank to close the fight and secure it, which led to Usyk to become the first undisputed cruiserweight champ since Evander Holyfield to become the undisputed heavyweight champion, and the last undisputed heavyweight champ since Lennox Lewis. Moments later, Usyk would get stripped of the IBF title for going ahead with the immediate Fury rematch 7 months after their first fight. Usyk would come up on top once more to end their rivalry. The following year in 2025, Usyk would fight IBF champion Daniel Dubois in his highly anticipated second fight for the undisputed title. Usyk would stop Daniel in 5 rounds to restore his status as undisputed. Not long after winning, Usyk would vacate the WBO title, then later the rest of the belts in 2026. And on top of that, this is what happened to every single undisputed champion since the year 2000. For more videos like these, be sure to like, share. If you're new, subscribe to the Patreon for Patreon-backed projects and early access. I'm Office Hancho, and I'm out.